So today on Bitcoin in 2 minutes. On this episode, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about, okay, you want to get into mining, you want to get some GPUs. What should you buy? What considerations should you take into account? Now, this is going to be specifically for Bitcoin. I'm not going to get into there are different coins that you can mine to maximize your profit. So this is going to be just very, very simply sticking to like a Bitcoin or Ethereum or something like that. Okay, so first things first. You can get a miner set up like this, or you can go out and buy a miner like this that will mine coin very, very quickly and be much better than setting up your own computer. However, setting up your own computer like this allows you to kind of learn how to build computers and how to learn how to set everything up, and is probably a good first start. And you don't have to spend $6,000 on a mining rig. You can do this much cheaper. The base can be bought for $50, and then it's just getting the components around it. So there's three things you really need to consider, which is power, how much power everything's going to use, the cost, how much is it upfront cost going to be for your equipment, and particularly the graphics cards. The other incidentals, your power supply and everything like that, is not really that much. And then the wattage, how much everything would use. So I'm going to stick specifically to NVIDIA graphics card. Should you go for the most powerful GPU you can get, like $1,000, even though it's $2,000 in December 2020, an RTX 3090, or should you back it down a little bit and try to get more budget oriented cards? Well, there's a couple things to consider. If you're going to go for a 3090, that's going to take up a very significant portion of a power supply. So if you have a 1,000-watt power supply, it's going to take up a significant portion of that. And versus a GTX 1070, you could probably get 2, maybe even 3 for the same amount of power that would get out of a 3090. What's interesting is if you kind of look at, this is not going to be a measure of Bitcoin, but if you look at kind of like the total output they'll do, the 3090 does 25,133 versus 13,331. It is not a good comparison, but let's just say that a 1070 is, half as fast, but you can run 2 of them, maybe even 3 of them for the same amount of power that you would be getting out of a 3090. So if you can run 4 of them in the same space that you would have, in the same power supply that it would have been taken up by a 3090, then you now have 1.5 times the power versus just one card. So let's examine the cost of that. When you buy a 3090 right now, you're going to pay about $2,000 for it, and as soon as you buy it, in 6 months, it's going to start losing money. Or you could get a GTX 1060 for around $150. Now, this is the Christmas time, and Bitcoin mania might be starting again, so this is starting to go up into the $200 range. Or you can get a 1070 for the 220-ish, 200 if you find a really good deal on it. And these are still somewhat readily available, and you can get them en masse. And for $1,000, $1,500, you can have a really good Bitcoin mining rig that's going to run relatively power efficient. It's not going to be as good as having a bunch of 3090s, but for a good budget rig, you could still do that. And if you went Radeon, it could be even cheaper, though Radeon seems to use a little more power than the GTX line. So NVIDIA versus Radeon, you can definitely do Radeon. You can save a little bit of money doing that. The power consumption is a little bit more, in my opinion, for the budget cards they have out. I'm not talking about the most expensive cards they have out now. And so, in my opinion, it is best to set up a GPU that has some cheaper cards to at least get started with, learn how to build the stuff. If you burn out a 1070, it's not that big a deal. If you burn out a 3090, you're out $1,000, $1,500. So, in my opinion, you want to get maybe some 1060s, some 1070s, just to get into it, to start learning how to do it. Once you set up your first one, it becomes really easy. And then if you want to start playing around with, mining altcoin instead of Bitcoin, that's fine. But in my opinion, your first rig should be 1060s, 1070s, 4 or 5, good power supply, just a cheap motherboard, $40, $50 motherboard with a $30, $40 processor. And for $1,000, $1,200, you can get out